ever had a dream that wasn't specifically a nightmare, but it just had you feeling strange when you woke up and you're thinking, wow, that was weird? And when you say that was weird, you don't think that was a pleasant dream, so it almost could have been a nightmare just because of your reaction to something weird. And I think that's why people in the 1800s and even into the 1900s and the 30s through I think the 50s would go see the freak shows, because they considered the freaks something weird that they were fascinated by and horrified by at the same time. And I think growing up, at least from my perspective, with something different, I always thought, you know, everyone's a freak. Everyone has something going on inside of themselves or outside or whatever. They can be too short, too tall, have a funny nose, have a personality disorder on the inside, have a temper control issue on the inside, have something that makes them need to drink all the time on the inside. It could be inside, outside, but everyone has something that makes them different, that would make them seem freakish to other people, that might make other people feel uncomfortable. And so I think there is no normal, because if everyone's a freak, to quote ABBA's beautiful song Me and I, it's, you know, there is no normal. If everyone is a freak and everyone has something that could make other people feel uneasy, uncomfortable, creeped out if they knew about it or focused on it too long, everyone is a freak, so there is no normal. So these people that would go see the freak shows didn't think about that. They didn't think about their own difference, because it wasn't as evident as the people that were born with these unfortunate defects, or the small people, or, you know, whatever. And sometimes in freak shows, people would fake their abnormality with costumes and makeup if they were willing to do that, just to kind of fool people, like the fake mermaids and other different creatures. Like the half man, half woman was actually a hermaphrodite, but they couldn't show that, so they would have them appear half male on one side of the body, half female on the other, for example. It's very fascinating. And I grew up with a visual difference, and I had to use different equipment in school and whatnot. And, you know, a lot of people just treated me like everyone else, because I obviously am. Just because my eyes don't work as well, it doesn't mean that I am different. But, you know, some people would be weird, and they would actually talk around me like I wasn't there, and I would have to turn around and say something nasty and embarrass them, and it felt really good. But, you know, it's what I would tell them, you know, just because I have this doesn't mean I'm any different than you, and you have yours too, trust me. You know, your little friends might not be able to see it, but you definitely have it, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So that was always fun. But I, even with my visual difference, doesn't mean I am as freaky as the person with the lobster claws. So I would love, if I had been around back then, to go to a freak show. Yes, I would. Because, again, it is fascinating and tantalizing and horrifying all at the same time, because that's how our mind reacts to something different. So this movie is called Freaks. It's from 1932, when all the good movies started coming out that were tantalizingly horrifying for all of us horror fans. Dracula, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde came out then. It was just like a really good time for the horror movies to start going into speaking form versus the silent films that came out in the 20s of horror. And Freaks was this producer's answer to Dracula and all that he had also been involved with. He wanted to add another element, and that is the horrific element of the freak show that was still going on. And a lot of the actors in this movie had actually been in freak shows and things, and some had not. It's got a fascinating background to it. Maybe I'll provide a Wikipedia link in the description. What do you think, Gomez?
I like that.
But I think that the movie was really received not so well when it first started out, and I think that people felt that the freaks were either too horrifying to look at, which it was a horror movie, that was the point, or being exploited, and I don't feel that they were being exploited at all. I think that the movie was kind of on the side of the freaks in a sense, saying, hey, you know, don't be mean to people, because without ruining the plot, someone who was a, quote, normal was trying to take advantage of a, quote, freak, and it did not work out so well, which is good. I think that it ended well because it ended badly for the person who was trying to take advantage. So that was really cool. But I actually, even as a kid, our state fair, you call it a carnival, I don't know what people in other countries call it, but we call it the fair because it's big. And the state fair is like in the state capitol, and it's giant, and you have rides, and you have games, and you have like food, and like sometimes music, concerts, whatnot, and it's really cool. But I used to love to go with my brother and sister, and we would ride the rides, and my mom would go, but she couldn't ride the rides because she would get sick. And so we would all go, and it was in October, and I would just remember this delicious, creepy feeling of the creepy carnies in October. And I think the whole thought of creepy carnies started from the freak shows when they were a part of such things. If you had a carnival back in the day, you would have the tent with the freak show, and they gave that atmosphere of creepiness, because a lot of times I think fear comes from what I mentioned earlier, that we want to watch something that is just strange, odd, tantalizing, and repelling at the same time, and for some reason that causes fear. I don't know if we think that something strange can hurt us because it's different or what. But, you know, everybody is a person, and everybody is just different. And I think once you educate yourself and get comfortable with that person and their difference, you don't have to feel, let's say, weirded out by it. And I think the weirded out is when people hold someone who's different at arm's length and don't try to educate themselves in a way that lets them be more comfortable. That's just my opinion. And I don't know that this movie would have much more acclaim today if it came out. It was not received well in the 30s. It got more acclaim in, I think, the 60s. And now it's pretty popular. But if it actually came out newly today, I think it would be too non-PC with all this PC censorship that we're getting with our so-called freedom of speech and expression. I think PC is killing that, which is politically correct. I assume everyone knows that by now. But I don't know that this movie would be popular today because of the whole PC issue. I think it would be seen as being too negative, which again, I think that it is on the side of the freaks, as it were. It takes their side, in my opinion. If you watch it, you'll see what I mean, and I don't want to ruin the plot. But again, you know, someone tries to take advantage, and they kind of get the tables turned on them pretty hard. And I'm not calling them freaks to be insulting. I just said we're all freaks, and I'm just using the terminology of the movie. So hopefully no one is trying to get offended today and will misunderstand that. Gomez, what are your thoughts on it? I have babbled long enough on mine. I just had to share that because of my obsession with the fair and the creepy carnies, even like as a kid growing up when there were no freak shows at all. I mean, you know, like there were none obviously, but I still just got that, you know, you look at the side and you look at the guy helping you on the ride and you go, oh, he's a creepy carny. He just looks different. He's a creepy carny. He travels with them. And like, he wasn't a freak or anything. Like there was nothing different, but he just somehow... In October, everybody working at the fair was deliciously creepy for me. And I don't know, it had to be in my head because of the freak shows from way back in the day, like, you know, before my mom was born. So, that's just my thoughts.
I really liked them. That was a good analysis.
Well, thank you. I learned from the best, and that would be you. And by the way, let me interrupt briefly our little flow to say we are Morticia and Gomez, and check out our freaky channel and like and subscribe and share if you're new.
Yes. We have many different things analyzed. So, analyzed.
That was intentional.
Yes. So, yeah, I like what Morticia said. I think to an extent for me, that kind of a genre de freak specifically, they sort of put me in the mystical mind frame of, because there's a lot of in-between. Like the way they describe fairies, the way they describe other things, where they're a little bit of this, a little bit of that, just physical enough to be human, not quite human enough. They bring to mind certain other elements of horror from the perspective of the viewer of those times, not always from mine, because my perspective is less usual.
Yeah, we're not really speaking about our own. We're talking about the people that were afraid of the movie.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't consider these people freaks. But I think I like what you're saying, Gomez, because you remind me of why people say they're afraid of dolls. I am afraid of dolls, so I was reading a doll article of doll fear, and it was like that dolls are not human, but they're looking almost human enough, but then they're not human too, and they look non-human and human, and it creeps people out.
Yes.
So they're like human enough that you expect them to move, and then like not human enough that if they do, that's not going to be cool for you. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And it reminded me of what you said about the human and non-human crossing.
Yeah, I like that. I think maybe I was unconsciously inspired by that concept too, because I was thinking that it connects from many typical tropes of the horror genre somehow.
And I like the in-between, because a lot of the in-betweens, like of the evening before day and night, and the in-between of where the fairies or trolls or whatever can cross from one world to the other, like the in-between.
Yes, I like that. So like horror meets fantasy.
Good, yeah.
And I think my understanding of this movie is that it sort of, to my mind, it seems to have inspired many other shows and I'm thinking even the Freak show that was more recent, and maybe Game of Thrones. I saw certain scenes that totally resonated for me.
Tyrion.
Yeah. Those of you who are familiar, which many people are these days familiar with Game of Thrones, would understand. And I guess it was also interesting for me the personal history of Todd Browning himself, who sort of got popular on the more acceptable and less.
He was a producer of this.
Yes, he produced that movie, and he got.
Like I said, some silent films. Like he worked with Dracula and some other. He worked a lot with Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi.
And that's kind of interesting because like those were the ones that made him famous, and they were in a sense maybe less dramatic than this one, and this one was the one that seems to have ended his career. And then it just shows how perception of horror even changes with time, which again goes back to what Morticia brought on earlier about.
You think you want horror, then it gives you horror, and then people complain about it. It's like, really? That didn't move me. I wasn't horrified. I was just like, okay, but it takes a lot to scare me. So, like I said, I was on the side of the quote freaks quote in this, definitely.
Yes.
Cheering them on.
And on a subtler note, I guess there's also Todd Browning has that characteristic that he always has a nice interplay of shadows. He had it in Dracula, he had it in other movies where it's a very nice visual contrast of the dark and the light, and of course it's all intentionally designed, very well orchestrated, very controlled, and it's always a pleasure to see. I'm not necessarily a greatest fan of black and white movies, but the way he does it and some others of his caliber, it's always engaging to watch because those contrasts are artistically stimulating.
I like black and white just because of the historical. Like, Gomez and I are both really into history, and I like the black and white because you're just looking at it and going, wow, this is how it was back in the day. You're like watching how it was, like almost a time travel thing. And the same thing for the sound quality. Like, it sounds old, but it's just so cool.
Yes. I like those too. Yes, the historical aspect is very interesting. It's like it kind of brings to mind what Stephen King was saying, how every major horror novel sort of represents the cultural aspects to some degree, and it's kind of interesting always whether I watch Twilight Zone and this movie to see the cultural climate of this era. It's almost like historical to watch that kind of...
It is, that's what I mean. As a historian, I really love that.
Yeah.
It's very exciting to watch the older stuff, and it's nice to watch modern shows made like the older stuff too, but it's more interesting that this was their modern when they actually made it, and it's older now. Like, the points of history brought up in the Twilight Zone, a lot of the episodes, like Gomez brought up, stuff like that.
Yeah. So those are the thoughts I had.
So definitely check out the movie if you do, and you have thoughts, leave them in the comments below. I think that, you know, the only thing I would leave people with is I felt sympathy for the people in the movie, and I'm not saying because I have a visual issue or whatever that I am a freak or anything like that. I'm just saying that I understand how they are made to feel different, and when people are being mean to them or feeling uncomfortable or weirded out or even afraid of them, they should think, how do you think that person feels to be in that body and live like that, and have the people on the outside treat them the way they do. The so-called normals who definitely aren't normal themselves if people could see inside of them. You know, no one is. So when you're creeped out by the lobster guy or whoever, just think, hey, you know what? I have mine too. He just can't see mine, and I can see his, and that's not a fair advantage. So keep it in mind, you know. I have always said if anything has been wrong with me, I'm glad it's a low vision issue rather than, like, I'm pretty vain about my looks and stuff. Not that I can be seen in this video, but I can be seen in others. But, I mean, you know, I would hate to have, like in the movie, there was Turtle Girl with flipper hands and feet and, you know, whatever. Like, if you said, okay, Morticia, you can have 20/20 vision and drive a hot Ferrari, but you're gonna have flippers. Like, no, I'll just take the vision. Like, so I do not envy them, and I definitely sympathize with them, and they have a plight that is, you know, they're having to live in a different thing. And hey, maybe Turtle Girl would say the same thing about me. She would be like, dude, I like my Ferrari, I got these gloves where I can drive it or whatever, and I would prefer to do that and not have a visual issue. So, you know, I'm not saying I don't want to be them and they have it worse than me. I'm saying it's all about perspective. And maybe someone with serious health issues, you know, would switch places with Turtle Girl or with me, or, you know, like if they have all their normal physical attributes and everything, but, you know, they have a lot of, like, asthma or something where they're weaker, or I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying everyone has their own thing, and, you know, everyone thinks that, you know, you're used to yours, you know yours, and maybe, you know, I don't think anyone really has it worse than anyone else. It's just about perspective. So, everyone's a freak, and I will leave you with that, and until next time,
stay spooky, my friend.